Okay, hi everybody. This is video 5 looking at the diamond, the DA40. It's the TDI version, which is the kind of lowest in the range. And we're going to look at the X-touch mini controller, which is a MIDI device. And we're going to try to emulate the transponder for this one here. So this is where we got to in the previous video, that we had allocated just about everything on layer A that we can. So we've sorted out for the Garmin 430, we've sorted out the comms, the navigation, the GPS units and all the buttons that are available for that, and we have also sorted out just about everything we can in terms of instrument control on the cockpit panel. So that's pretty well done. So the only device left to us now is the transponder, and I'll put that onto layer B. Layer B I use for my low priority instruments, things you don't touch very often during flight. So that'll go quite nicely on layer B. So I'll label that in red underneath the buttons so that you can see what we're doing. And there's a couple other functions we can play with later, but let's have a look at this transponder and we'll see what we can sort out for that. So this is the transponder, and I've no idea what model it is. It hasn't actually got any model number written on it. It's slightly different layout, slightly different functions from the ones I've been doing in the Cessna series, but they're all pretty much the same basic idea. So obviously we've got a couple of different states for this. It can be in standby mode, so we can set up a squawk code beforehand if we know what we're going to be given, and it won't be transmitting it and cluttering up ATCs and airways and that until we actually want to get flying. And then we've got a couple of different modes there. We've got the normal on mode, which will on demand transmit our squawk code, and we can also force it to transmit. If they want us to flash up the ident on their screen, we can press the ident button. Strange, this one, most idents only last for about 5 seconds or so, and then it goes off, or they may ask us to turn it off to cut down clutter, and that ident doesn't work. The only way out of it really is to go to standby and back to on again, and it stops the ident working. I don't know if that's a feature of this unit or a little bugget from the implementation, but that's all we can do. Obviously these buttons here put in the squawk code for us, and if we cancel our IFR or stop the flight following, we've got a quick button back to our VFR code, so that works really nicely. Over on this side here we've got a couple of different functions, a couple of different modes this works in. Excuse me. Firstly, it's working out what the pressure and altitude is, and transmits your flight level. So if you're in alt mode, it will transmit that. Now I can't find any way of changing that pressure, which is sort of important. It's not so important here because we're not linked to any autopilot, but in other aircraft, when it's linked to the autopilot, if you tell it to hold at a particular altitude, it will link to your transponder, and if you haven't got the pressure right, it will level you out at what it thinks is, say, flight level 10 or 10,000 feet, whatever it is you've set as your desired altitude. That may not correspond to what it is to real life. That if you're flying below the transition altitude, you would be setting up whatever you've been told your pressure is for the day, and that will be set here. That only controls this instrument. It doesn't feed back into here at all. So you set this correctly here and you fly what is indicated 10,000 feet, and that'll be correct, but this may be only showing 9,000 feet if the pressure is very different. And that's when you start to get that dreaded call from ATC, please expedite your climb and hold, that kind of thing, because this may be set incorrectly. A lot of people don't realise you need to go in and set that here. So if you're flying on autopilot, this will think you're at 10,000 feet, and this will be showing something different. So there'll be discrepancies between the two. But I can't find any way in here of getting into working that. I would have thought that pressing the cursor would have brought you into here somewhere, and you could change settings. I tried putting particularly if you're working in Mercury, you want to put 29.92. Any button I press here is going to affect my squawk code. I can't put in anything else. 8 and 9 won't work for a squawk code. Squawk codes only go up to 7. That's the history of the device. It can only handle 8 different numbers, and it goes from 0 to 7. So I can't find any way into this at all. So can't do that. The other functions it's got are flight time, but again, I can't start and stop that manually. I'm guessing that it works out when you leave the ground and starts automatically. I've not bothered to look at it once we're in flight, to be honest. Next function, it tells you what it considers its temperature and the altitude is, and that altitude of 11 feet is about right if it for standard pressure, and that's what we're on today. Doesn't really matter what we do with the Coldsman up the barometer. Doesn't link back to here at all, so that doesn't change. Okay, so next function, it's got a count up timer. So you click on there and it's basically a stopwatch, and we can stop it and we can clear it. That's quite easy to use. And it's got a countdown timer. So I could count down, so I wanted to put in 30 minutes here, so it's no hours, so 0, 0. Oh, that's interesting. It goes straight into putting your squawk code in. So what we need to do is turn on the cursor. So we click cursor, and it doesn't turn on a cursor, but now if I put my 0, 0, 3, 0, that works, and my 8 and 9 would work. Of course, it doesn't make any sense here, but if you wanted to have 9 hours, you could put a 9-hour timer. So those numbers work in here quite happily. And again, we can start that and it'll start doing the countdown. We can stop it, and when we press clear, it does a reset. But if I press cursor, that zeroes that, and yeah, 58 hours of flying. Try that without crash the desktop. But that works. Okay, so I should be able to turn that cursor off and go back to my squawk code, you would think. But not so. So we need to, once we've cursored, we need to come out of this function here. So there's a few little sticky bits and pieces with it. But if we go back to our normal functions, we're back to our squawk code. So just knowing what it does, really, we can work around that. Okay, so we want to try and emulate these. Firstly, these buttons here, putting in the squawk code is going to be important to us. So what I would normally do is I would bring in here, and I would watch, firstly, simulator events and see what's happening here as we do this. So let's watch these simulator events. So I've tried to put a squawk code in. Let's and as I put the numbers in, absolutely nothing appears here, so we're not going to get many clues from that, what's happening, until we get to the end and it gives us the code that it's sending in. So obviously it fills up some kind of buffer. When it's got 4 figures, it then calculates what it needs to send, and it's sending a code which is, it's not fun to work with, binary coded decimal. So if I press a VFR, let's go to there. If I now let's have a squawk code of 1. It's clear sending a 1, and let's clear that out, and we'll try 0, 0, 1, 0, and you can see what it's sending. So that's this is a 16, so it's kind of like a base 16 thing. It's a horrible code to work with, calculating those for yourself. So that's not the approach I want to take. So let's have a look at, see if we can watch a variable. So what I would normally do if I want to watch variables, let's bring that in. I want to watch a variable here. So I would have a guess at looking for a transponder. And look at my filter here, The only codes that we can look at, we can read that code there, which is pretty much what we're doing there, so we can actually find out what the code is. We can, in one of the events, send that code, but it's too complicated. So what we've got is the ident switched on and off, or what's the transponder state? And I'll come back to that later. So there really aren't many variables for us to watch here. If we take this code out, and we can try and look for the short code for transponder. And it says, is the breaker done? And that's about it really. So there's not much for us to play with on this one. So it looks a bit disappointing. But if we bring over, let's bring my script editor over. If we do a search for sim events that we could use, again we look for the transponder. To start with, there are a couple that are potentially useful for us. This is that setting the transponder code if you know what the then you could calculate the binary coded decimal, but it's a horrible way of doing it. You've got the ability here to increase and decrease the 4 figures independently. So we could, in theory, set our tidy up here a little bit. We could, in theory, let's move this out. The X-touch mini up like this. We could, in theory, set it up with a button for making the 1000 go down and up, or the hundreds go down and up, tens, units. So that would work, and I've done that on a previous video. It's not very realistic. It's not the same as just pressing 4 buttons. It's doing it in flight and up and down, choosing the numbers. It works, but it's not great. You could, in theory, allocate those to 4 rotaries, and there are some old transponder units that work like that. They have 4 different rotary controls. I've not seen one for quite a while, but I remember they do exist. So that would be feasible, but again, it doesn't match our unit here. So what we really want to do is to look for a way of having this as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and just have those buttons that we can press. That would be really useful. But it's not obvious where to search for variables and things like that. I've tried all sorts of searches to find it, and it's just sort of not apparent. If we look for sim variables, what variables have we got that we can play with? Again, we'll look for the transponder. Not in terms of events, but in terms of variables, because this is often a way in. They're just not there. They just. And if we clear that filter, there's nothing much to play with. Let's clear the filter, and even if you go hunting through the HTML variables, but unfiltered. But by chance, I did discover that there is, and I'll bring up a script. If we write a script here, looking at somebody else's work, I found that there is a completely undocumented function, a variable, transponder 0 and transponder 1, and those exist. I can't find any documentation about them where they are. It's an HTML variable, and that will send a 0, that will send a 1, that will send a 2. So we could write a script, and that's what I'm going to do, is to write a script that so we'll allocate this script here, this 0 to this button, the 1 to that button too, and that will send those numbers. I'm not sure, because it's not documented, it means it may be in development, it may disappear, but at the moment it does work. So what we end up with then here is using this piece of code. So if we walk through the code and explain how that works, and I'll show you how to write the code, and then I'll show you how to implement it. This is what we're sending. We'll be sending a 1 because it's on, it's true, and we're going to send it. And that means to send. If we just insert a variable, which we can't do here because it doesn't appear in any list, we have to type it. But if it was available, we could insert it, but it wouldn't put the greater than. And that greater than here actually means send the output to this. So we're going to send to that. Without that, if you don't put that, it reads it. It gets the transponder number. But this one here is send transponder 0 and send it as a number. And that, it just seems to work. Not documented anywhere. So I would literally, this is how I would do it. Let's do a quick demo. Firstly, you need to set up a group here to keep this tidy. So we manage the script groups, and if I create a group for the demo transponder, and we'll add that and close. So that should be on my list here. There's my demo transponder, and there's no scripts in it yet. So if I wanted to write a new script to match that, I would say it's going to go into this group here, and this would be, say, I could say this is transponder 0 or something like that. You just give it a title you're going to recognize later, and you literally we're going to have to type this in. So 1, and then what this editor does is it makes the spaces really clear. When I press, that's the space bar I pressed. I haven't pressed a dot or anything like that. It puts a dot to stand for a space so that you can see obviously where you put your spaces. I've got this programmer habit of opening and closing my brackets. When I open a bracket, I close it and then go back and insert, so I know that I've balanced my brackets. And we literally just type in and again, this is the space, and that's it. That would be the code that we put in, and then I would save that as new, and you'll find that that's in here. And I want to do the same now for send it, so I can send the digit 1. What I would do here, quite simply, I would change the title, change that to a 1, and then save that as new, and you'll see it appears there. So I've now got those two. So it doesn't take long to set up 0 to 7. If I make a change, if I discover I've made a mistake or something somewhere, you edit it here. So if it was the 0, double click on that, that brings the 0 back up again, and make your change and update it rather than save it as new. So let's get rid of that. Let's do some tidying up. So the transmit demo can be deleted, and it will warn me that it's going to kill off those 2 scripts, and that's fine. Off they go. So I've already got my scripts written, and they're all identical apart from the number that it's after it. So we need to allocate that now. So if we have a look at what's going on here, let's bring the flight sim back up again, and we'll put the VFR in, and I'll bring that over here so we can see what we're doing, and I'll put my camera on as well so you can see my actual genuine day. And I'm working on bank B, so be careful with that. Make sure that you're working on bank B, layer B. So working on layer B, we are now going to try and allocate those assignments. We have to have written the script because that function, that transponder function, doesn't appear anywhere in this list, so we can't pick it from that list, and we can't type directly into here. If I click on there, it's saying you've got to pick something, so it has to be a script that I've written. So we're going to pick it from here and allocate it to layer B, this button here, which I have got written as 0, and add that in. So now when I press on this button here, that should send a 0 to here. which it does. So that's how it works. Okay, so let's VFR that again. So it's just a question now of allocating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 across the bottom there. So my transponder 1 allocated to that, add, and then we'll do the same again. My transponder codes 2 being allocated to the next button across. 3. Okay, so really I suppose we'll test these, so we'll just check the numbers. So we know that 0 worked, 1, 2, 3, and that will put the squawk code in for there. Let's put a new squawk code, 4, 5, 6 and 7, despite what it actually says on there. I don't know if the resolution's high enough, but because I copied and pasted across, this is a draft overlay that I've done at the moment. When I've got this absolutely finished, what I'll do is I'll put it up onto my GitHub, and I'll put a link on it in the description, so that my finished version with all the spelling errors and whatever is out of it, and you can download that if you want to. It requires an A3 printer, I'm afraid, for that to work. But anyway, we can put our squawk codes in, so we've achieved what we want to there. I'd quite like to get the VFR sorted out as well. We'll come back to that in a bit. I'd quite also like to play with these buttons here to make sure that we can switch things on and off. What I did was, let's bring back my watch variables. We're going to watch some variables, which is here, and these are the variables we're after, so we can select a variable, and it's something to do with the transponder. And what I want to look at is the transponder state. Now we have to, again, it's not in the instructions anywhere, but there could have more than one transponder, believe it or not. So we have to actually index it with a :1. Transponder number 1 we need to look at, so we'll add that variable in. And it says we're working in mode 4, which is the altitude mode. So let's go through these buttons here. Off is 0. Standby is 1. On is 3. And altitude is 4. So there is no mode 2 on this unit. Mode 2 actually is test, the test state, and this one doesn't have that. So it does its own self-test at the beginning. So having sorted out that transponder and the number that we're sending, allocate them those 8 scripts to the right button, and then I want to allocate on, off, alt, VFR and ident. That's what I want to send. So looking here, This is the transponder state 0, and this is the code we're going to use for that script. Send it, and it's an A variable, not an HTML variable this time, it's an A variable. It's been around for a while, that means. We're going to send it the transponder state to transponder number 1, so we must put that colon in there. We need to type that in. We're going to send 0 for the off, so that'd be one script we'll write. We'll write another script for the standby state, which is sending 1. We'll send a 2. We could send a 2 for the test, but it's not used on this unit, but we could write that script for it quite happily. And we send a 3 for the ordinary on state and a 4 for the alt state. So we need to write a couple of scripts to make that work. And if we bring back our script editor, I've already written them. Let me just double check them. So my off should be sending a 0 to transponder state for 1. My on is sending a 3, that's right. Standby sends a 1, so that's right. And alt is sending a 4. So I've got these 4 different scripts that I've written. I'll demonstrate writing one of those scripts. So let's clear that out and bring it back in here so it's empty. Again, I would make sure you've got a group set up and tell it where to go. So if I was going to write a script, I would say this is going to go to my transponder, give it a title, which is my demo, but I'm not going to save it, but it's what you would do. And I would insert the sim variable, and it is this transponder state here. So if I double click on that, that puts it in, and then I can say I'm going to send a 0, so don't forget the space, 0, and it's going for number to transponder number 1, and you need to put the greater than, the pipeline, the send it to that. So having pulled that variable in, we then tell it what we want to send, the fact that we're going to send it to it rather than read it, and we need to put the index in, and that's what we would do there. So I'm not going to save that, I'm just going to close that down and I'll chuck that away. So I've written those 4 scripts already, so it's now a question of allocating it to the buttons. So back into the flight simulator, and let's bring the camera back up. So we are going to allocate. Again, we're looking at my scripts that I've already written, and I'm going to send the off script to this button here. So we are still in layer B, but it's this one up here, so that we should send an off to that. The next one across, I'm going to do the on. So we'll allocate, because really I'm not going to use the standby very often, so we might as well go straight to switch the thing on. So on is going to go to this one here, and we will allocate the standby just to be complete about things. So it's my transponder scripts, and it's the standby going to button number the 3rd one across, and we need to put the alt mode in, and there's my alt. And we'll test that. So let's turn it off manually here, and that should switch it on, which it does. Now I have to say, we've discovered this before with this one and with a previous one. This script here, for some reason, is extremely flaky. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's switching between the modes quite happily here. So I can switch it off again and switch it on again. Sometimes for some reason it just doesn't work. So what I've discovered is if you turn it to offline mode in X's and O's, wait about 10 seconds and click it back online, it does bring it back. It's lucky we don't use this very often, really we're going to set it up before we fly and hard lift to touch it. The squawk codes and the VFR button will work, but it's these ones here that seem to get the script goes flaky. I have no idea why. Okay, so let's have a look at this VFR button. Let's watch what's going on with that. What I want to do is, I know there's the code of set the code, but I want to work out what number to send for 7000. So we watched a variable before, watch that simulator event, and let's clear that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in 7000 and see what number comes up. So we can do that from here, 7000, and that's the number that comes up, 28672. So that's what I'm going to send again, and in a script. So let's have a look at our script editor, and I've already written the script, and you'll see what it looks like. It's the VFR, and it's literally, we're going to send that number that we've discovered, the 7000. We're going to send it again, so we've got the greater than sign, the pipeline sign, send it to transponder. We're going to send a transponder code to number 1, and that's the format it's in. If I clear that, let's bring that back. So if I was going to write that, I would insert the sim variable transponder, and it's this one here. So I would put that in, type that to 8672 space, don't forget the space. We need the greater than sign and index it to 1, and that's what I would save by changing the group and putting the title in there. So that's how I would send that code there. But I've already done that, so we just need to allocate that to a button. So we'll do our allocations over here. And it's one of my scripts, and it's my VFR script. So there we are, we're in, and I'm going to allocate that one here to my VFR button, and we'll just test that. So let's put a different squawk code in, 2232, and now we'll decide we're going to go back to VFR, press the button, and it's putting the 7000 for us. That's nice and easy. And the last one over here is to toggle the ident. So let's have a look at toggling the ident. Of course, I've got a script for that already written. No, I didn't need to write a script for that. That's okay. Well, there is actually a command that we can put straight in. So let's go and have a look at allocating the transponder ident toggle. Here we go. It's there. So expand the ident toggle. I don't think we need to do anything else with it. We just need to allocate that to the ident button. I think it just worked, if I remember rightly. So we click on add, and keep an eye on here. If I press the ident button on my deck here, there it is. And in fact, it's better because it does toggle, unlike this one here, which doesn't toggle. So actually, hey, we've improved something. So we can do that, and that works fine. So that is it. We have everything allocated here. Quick look on here. Let's have a look at where we're up to. Off, on, standby, alt. There is no test mode. The VFR's done. The ident is done. So that's it. The transponder is now up and running, barring the fact that it's slightly flaky once you actually get flying. But we'll do a test flight, and we'll see later on how that works. So next video, I'm going to just do one quite short video, because the one thing that we haven't done in the cockpit so far, if I bring that back here, we haven't actually looked at the lighting controls here. So I'll allocate those to some rotaries. I warn you in advance that some of it works and some of it's a little bit difficult to work with, but quite nice to get the lighting sorted out just for completeness. So that's it. That's one more video for that, and then we'll do a test flight and see if it all works. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video. I'm not quite sure when I'm going to do that one, but here we go. We'll close off on this one.